you are gonna start your dream today, and I'm gonna show you how. So if you have got something that you really wanna do, maybe you wanna start a business, or you wanna write a book, or become an influencer, no matter what the thing is that you know you wanna be doing but you haven't started yet, today is the day and we are gonna make it happen. Most people tend to overcomplicate the starting process and they do a lot of research. Guilty, my past self was really guilty of that. And so today I'm going to show you my 3 steps for getting started on your dream so that at the end of today, you can say, I've actually begun. Okay, so let's dive into step number 1, and that is to start at the end. Most people, when they have a big goal or a dream, they ask the question, where do I start? And while it sounds like a really good question, it's actually the wrong question to ask, because when you ask yourself, where do I start? You put yourself so far away from the actual goal. Like you want to be all the way over here and you're going, where do I start? How do I begin all the way back here? It actually puts you further away from the goal. And what you really want to be asking is the question, where do I end? How do I get myself as close to the end as I possibly can as quickly as possible? So I want you to think about the result that you want to create. Hold that in your mind for a second. What is the step that comes right before you create that result? What is the action that you would have to do that would come directly before that? That is where you want to focus your energy. Because if you start at the beginning, you're going to spend all of your time doing beginner level things. And if you start at the end, you get to do the things that are actually going to create the result. So for example, I had a client who came to me wanting to become an influencer. And she said, well, where do I begin? Do I start by taking a photography course? And I was like, no, if you go immediately to the photography course or to learning about Instagram or doing something like that at the beginning, you're gonna be stuck at the beginning phase forever. What actually happens before an influencer gets paid? And she was like, well, they reach out to brands. And that is exactly where she started. So we had her reach out to brands as her very first step, even though she didn't have an Instagram, even though she didn't know photography, she didn't even have anything set up, but she started reaching out to brands. She reached out to 6 different safaris in Africa and ended up getting 2 responses, and one of them booked her. And she is, I'm not kidding you, right now in Botswana on a safari tour across 3 different places, and they're flying her between all of their different locations on this safari in their own private helicopter. It is wild. And that only happened because she decided that she wasn't going to spend all of her time learning skills in the start, and she was going to focus just on the thing that had to happen right before she created the result. So from the idea to actually being in Botswana at these safaris was 3 months. That's all. So I highly recommend you do not ask yourself, where do I start? And go straight instead to, where do I end? What is the action that comes right before the end? Now, sometimes you're gonna look at this and go, well, I can't do that action. That action might be something that you need to do something before. So let's say that you wanna start a business and you think, well, I want to offer things to people. I wanna sell something, but you don't have anything to sell. Then that's okay. Maybe you look at the step before. Okay, I'm gonna come up with what it is that I'm going to sell, and then I'm gonna sell it. Not create it. You don't even have to create it because you can sell things before you actually create them. But you just want to look at what is the first feasible step that I can do that is the closest to the end. And that is going to get you to where you want to go so much faster. You're not only going to start your dream today, but you're going to actually start moving towards it and creating genuine momentum. Okay, so once you have your result-producing action, you can move on to step 2, which is to set expectations. Most people fail at their goals because their expectations of what they actually need to do are just way off. When you think about reaching out to a brand or offering your service to someone or doing the specific action that you need to do that comes right before your result, most people just don't even think about how many times they're gonna need to do that. And so what we wanna do is really set expectations from the beginning of how many times you're probably gonna need to do that action, because it's probably gonna be a lot. And most people don't think about that until they're in it and they've done it twice and they're like, it's not working, let me change the strategy. And then you end up right back at the beginning. And we don't wanna do that. We want you to know from the beginning, how much am I actually gonna have to do here? Like, how many actions, how many times am I going to have to do this? And so I want you to calculate that right now. Take your result producing action that you just came up with, and I want you to think about how many times are you going to need to actually do that result producing action in order to create your result. Now, the key to figuring out the exact number, because we do want to make an educated guess here, is to start at a crazy high number. So let's start at 1,000,000. If you did your result producing action 1,000,000 times, do you think you could create the result? If the answer is yes, then you want to bring that number down. If it's like, obviously, if I did it 1,000,000 times, if you did it 500,000 times, would you create the result? Likely, right? If you did it 100,000 times, what about if you did it 500 times? How do you feel now? 200 times, 100 times, 50 times. You want to get to the number where your brain is like, yeah, obviously I am going to be able to achieve the goal if I do that result producing action that many times. But also you want that number to be the lowest version of that feeling that you have. So I know that if I do my result producing action 1,000,000 times, I'm going to achieve the result. But I also know that if I do it 100 times, I'm definitely going to achieve the result. So I want to pick the number that's the lowest, but still makes me have that feeling of, obviously, if I do it that many times, I'm going to achieve the result. So now you have a number of times that you expect yourself to need to do that action. Maybe you won't have to do it that many times. It's quite possible that on the 2nd or the 3rd or the 10th attempt, you will actually create the result. But you have to know what you are willing to do, because if you get to the 3rd attempt and you haven't planned this out, you're just going to want to give up. But if you know, oh, I was planning to do 100 anyway, and I'm on my 45th, well, that's fine. I was always expecting to do another 55 after this. So pick a number right now, take your best educated guess at how many times you are going to need to do your result producing action. So for example, if your result producing action is to make phone calls, then maybe you need to do 50 phone calls. Or if your result producing action is to pitch publishers, you get to choose how many times it's going to be, but you've got to make a commitment that you are willing to do it that many times before changing your strategy or before giving up. Once you've decided your result producing action and you've committed to the number of times it's going to take, then you can move on to step number 3, which is to be messy on purpose. I once had a client come to me and say, Sarah, there is no way that I can take action on this goal unless it is complicated and difficult and pretty and consistent. And I loved hearing her say that, because this is something that so many people get caught up in, myself included in the past. And so I want to offer, instead of trying to make it complicated and difficult and pretty and consistent, that you make it simple, easy, ugly, and random. And you do it on purpose. This is a concept that I tell myself all the time. You know what? It can be simple, easy, ugly, and random. And it does not need to be the perfect way. In fact, we're doing it messy on purpose, because if I try to make it complicated and difficult and pretty and consistent, I'm never going to do it at all. So you really want to look at, how can I be messy on purpose so that I actually take action, instead of how can I try and do this the best possible way. So if you try to show up perfectly, or you try to show up even well, the chances of you actually following through on it are much smaller. The best thing you can possibly do is show up messy on purpose so that you actually create the result. And just because your process was messy doesn't mean your result is going to be messy. You can create a really clean outcome from a ton of messy action. So take your result producing action and ask yourself, how can I do this in the most simple, easy, ugly, random way that is actually going to get me a really nice result? All right, those are the 3 steps to starting your dream today. Start at the end, set expectations, and be messy on purpose. If you do those 3 things, you will be so much further ahead than if you start at the beginning and you have no idea how much it's going to take from you and you try to do it perfectly. I promise you, you're going to create amazing results. So tell me right now in the comments, I want to know, what is going to be your result producing action that you're going to take messily, and I look forward to talking with you in the next video.